So you're majorly confused and you don't know what to do, and you need a little aid to get those decisions made. You know where to go, it's the one and only show, Major Confusions. Ding.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dina, and welcome to the Intertwined podcast by Major Confusions, where we demystify how impact driven and sustainable careers are built in the real world. We're here with Suzanne, who is driven by better health outcomes for all, regardless of who you are and where you come from. Suzanne's path shows us how being open to opportunities, focusing on building relationships, and showing up with energy and compassion sets us up for success. She also redefines what success is by making sure it includes taking care of ourselves and our loved ones and the people around us. You'll hear her story of how she navigated career decisions, and I hope it inspires you to follow your curiosity, seek challenge, and embrace opportunities. I love this conversation with Suzanne, and I hope you do too. Thank you for listening to this episode, and most importantly, thank you, Suzanne, for sharing your story with us today. Hello.
Hi.
To get us started, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Well, I think I had a million ideas actually. So when I was small, I liked being on the stage and I liked singing and dancing and acting. So I think I often wanted to have some sort of career in acting and singing and performing in some way. But I think I was really encouraged to have a sensible career, as perhaps it was put. So when I was a bit older, I remember I wanted to be a chef and I went to work in a commercial kitchen. That was a very scary experience. And I realized very, very quickly that I didn't want to do that for very long. And then I wanted to be a pilot. I had visions of joining the RAF actually and becoming a pilot. And then I just fell into my career actually. I fell into marketing and never really thought too much about what my dream was when I was little. I changed my mind a lot.
When you say you were encouraged to have a sensitive career, sensible career, what were your influences?
My parents, I think it was very much expected. I think for me, when I was small, the idea that you could go and get a job and earn money and have a conventional life was really encouraged. And it's funny because when I went to live in Paris, when I was doing my degree, I had a year working out in Paris and living there, and I had the most amazing time. But lots of my friends, they were older than me, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years older. And they were studying and working on these internships and just having a really fun time. And I remember thinking, you're 25, like, why haven't you settled down with a job? This is craziness. And I was thinking just how different it was in the UK versus Europe. I had a lot of friends from other countries, and yet that was what was normal. This expectation that you needed to get a job and money. I bought my house as soon as I left university. It was just what was expected, and I didn't really question it because there were a lot of benefits to getting a job straight out of university. So I didn't question it. I just went along with it and was happy to enter the working world as quickly as possible.
Wow, it's funny when you compare the working cultures from France and Paris to the UK here.
It was really different, really different. It was really common that people were taking 4 or 5 years to do their undergrad, and then they were going on to do masters, doing doing courses where you could do 1, 2, 3 years abroad. So you might spend a year in Oxford, a year in Madrid, a year in Paris, or a year in Berlin, do a 3 year course. And this was after you'd done your undergrad degree. And that to me absolutely blew my mind. It was just so different from what I was used to. And even when I went on to do my MBA, I worked full time the whole time. In fact, I then did a postgraduate diploma with the Chartered Institute of Marketing as soon as I left university. And again, I was working full time and studying in the evenings. So it was easier before I had children to do a lot of studying while working. It made it work.
Just focus on the studying and then priorities switch later on.
Exactly.
I guess when you were back in school, what were you like kind of going back to the younger selves when you wanted to be a chef? Was more on the creative side of acting and yeah.
Yeah, so I really enjoyed English. I liked reading, and I enjoyed words more than numbers. I enjoyed maths, but I definitely sat more in on the English side. And I was creative, and I enjoyed, as I said, things like drama, music. But I mean, if you saw my artwork when I was at school, I wasn't gifted with a paintbrush at all. Doesn't matter how much I enjoyed it. And I think I have a real creative flair, but I didn't have much of a skill for that. I enjoyed woodwork actually, and some of the kind of graphic design content that we covered when I was at school. So that was those are the kind of things that I did. But I was really I'm the eldest of my siblings, and I always felt that, being the eldest child, you have to take charge and know what you're doing, and yeah, be in control. So I was pretty sure about, what I wanted to do, what I liked, and I was quite happy to like drive forward with all of these things.
So when you said you're sure about what you wanted to do in terms of the which part of it was the studying or the extracurricular stuff?
Yeah, probably both. I'm really decisive. So as soon as I try something out, I either like it or I don't like it, and then move on to the next thing. And I mean, it's not, when I was at school, it's not like the way it is with my children. Like they have 10,000 clubs every single week. It's like they have everything and they're doing things all the time, which is, very different from when I was at school. But I used to horse ride at the weekends, and I really loved that. I still ride horses now. And I did dancing and singing and drama kind of clubs outside of school. So I did the things that I really enjoyed. I played the drums. I found it really difficult to read music. So it was really hard learning, the flute or violin or the piano. I just found it difficult to read the notes as fast as the music was, and the drums were a lot easier than that.
I can totally relate to the reading the notes. I remember the piano teacher actually writing the notes for me. She's like, "No, you're too slow." What do you imagine was the influencing factor to actually being decisive and knowing, okay, I want to pursue the drums? Or because a lot of the times you start an activity and you feel like you need to stick it out, even if you don't enjoy it. Versus, I love that you're like, no, I don't like it. I won't continue.
I felt like I had a mix of pressure of whether you should do these extracurricular activities versus your schoolwork, etc. So in an ideal world, it was sort of an expectation that you need to be good at everything, and enjoy everything, and then don't give up. Like we don't quit. Like that was really common when I was a child. Try not to quit things. And actually, when I was very small, I gave up ballet and tap. I think I can only have been, I don't know, 5 or 6, 7. I don't remember. And then as
Mhm.
I got older, I went back to it, and I enjoyed going back to it. I don't know, what stopped me at the time, but I don't know if it was, perhaps, it's not uncommon that we give things up just because they're difficult. So maybe that's what was going on, or distraction with other things. I felt like when I was a child, we had a lot of things that were going on socially, just playing football in the garden, and, going on walks. We had a lot of outdoor space, and I think there was much more of a sense of community. So we had a lot of activities that had nothing to do with school. We were just, getting home from school, getting on our bikes, going around the corner and running around and catching crickets and grasshoppers and, tadpoles in streams. And that was all really, really normal. Came much later when all of a sudden we had to be far more worried about strangers and things like that. So I think when I was young, as I said, I have younger brothers and sisters. And so for me, being the eldest, I was often just, I don't know if it was expected or whether it was innate, but I had to take
Mm.
charge. I had to take charge, and then we'd make decisions on things. And that was just normal to me. And in a way, I never really questioned it until I was a lot older as to whether I do that because it was expected, or whether it's the way, is it innate? Is it
Yeah.
how I would to behave.
And how did that, like, these interests evolve as you went into later on in within your school?
I think for me, there was you focus far more on your studies versus the extracurricular activities. And I moved schools when I was 15, so I had done the first half of the first year of GCSEs in the UK, that based on that system. So it was a really bad time to move schools, and it was really difficult to then, even small things like I could do two languages in my first school, but not two languages in my second. And so I had to sit one GCSE really early and then another one, a little bit further along. You could pick, history or geography in the next school. You had two options. It was just more. I found it more restrictive where I moved to. So at that point, extracurricular activities were not important at all. It was very much like trying to fit in, meet
Mm.
people, and do well academically.
How did that experience of switching schools feel like at 15? Because it must have been tough.
So when I look back, yes, it was rubbish. I think, and I moved schools a few times actually as a child, and I think for me, it's made me really resilient. I can really
Mm.
easily walk into that room and, you're networking at some event and I'm straight over like, hi, I'm Suzanne. It's lovely to meet you. And I find that really easy. Whether it's pleasurable or not is another matter, but I find it really easy. And I think for me personally, it made me really resilient. It made me have to be really comfortable just standing up in front of people. And I think I know that my siblings would say, oh, really? Yeah, I mean, none of us enjoyed it, but I think for different personality types, I think I am a classic extrovert. I don't mind putting myself out there, but I think for more introverted people, that was really, really hard. And I think what I've learned now is I think really as children, even when we think we're so grown up at, 15, 16, 17, like we're not, we're really just babies. And I think, in those days, I think of all the bad habits, of all the things that we did. When I look back and I think, oh, we did those things. We were, so easily influenced. And so when you're moving into a new environment where you're trying so hard to be accepted and liked and fit in, whatever you have to do, you kind of, want to do. So I think that was really very hard, and I didn't have a bad experience, and I made some really great friends that's moving school then, people that I'm still friends with now. But yeah, when it got to 18 and I got to go to uni, it's nice to start all over again in an environment where everyone was new, because then you're all on an even playing field.
Yeah, it's different when you join a group that's already connected versus you're all new to this experience and you get to all the new relationships together.
Totally. And you're trying to understand the lay of the land, who's really in charge here and who's bringing what to the party. And you just don't have any idea of that until you really spend some time. And that's quite hard when you're sort of plunged into a group and you don't know whether that's the group that you want to be with, whether you're going to be hanging around with people that you have any of the same shared values. And I think, as I said, back to, what do we really know when we're children?
Hmm.
We like to think we're grown up, but really we're just little sponges that are learning everything and trying to figure out who we want to be. I don't know that we really understand our values when we're children. I think we just, even like teaching children to share, we're kind of out for ourselves when we're small. And I think it takes time to really understand how you really want to behave and portray yourself in the world, because maybe from a human instinct perspective you take and take and take, but there is a point in your life where you suddenly think, is this what I want to be? Do I just want to take, or how good does it feel to give back? And yet some of those things, they don't instinctively come naturally to children, and you gradually go on that journey. But I think, yeah, if you surround yourself by people who perhaps are at opposite values when you're learning your own, that's quite difficult for children.
Wow, I love that. It's at what point do you start formulating your values? Is it when you're exposed to also new values and you're like, that feels uncomfortable to me. Do I want to fit in within these values, or do I do the harder thing, which is carve out my own and leave that group? I guess going back to your career decisions within high school, because you mentioned we still don't know our values. We still don't know a lot of things when we're 15, 16. But unfortunately, that's the time when we need to be making a lot of decisions, like what classes to take that will get us to the right degree in university and so on, if we end up going to university. So how did you formulate your decision on where to go next?
I picked the A levels that I enjoyed the most. So I did A levels in business, in English, and in politics and economics. They were the ones that I enjoyed the most. And I really enjoyed the subjects. That was my biggest, like, I'm going to come in here every day and learn. I want to learn about the things that I enjoy the most. So I sat my A levels. Again, I wouldn't change anything, but my priorities as a 16, 17-year-old were very much around social and friends and all of those kind of things. So I was working hard, but it wasn't my life. School wasn't my life. I enjoyed it, and but even my academic choices, a lot of my choices were not necessarily based on trying to go to the best universities. Finance was a really big factor, because I think when I went to university, we'd just seen that big change where you didn't get bursaries and grants and things the way you had in the past. You had to pay to go to university. And so you're paying for university and you're paying for tuition fees and all of these kind of factors. And so the way I had been brought up, there was like some fear around, it was almost this, as soon as you leave university, you're going to be in the workplace and you're going to be working and earning. And so kind of get that debt covered quickly and get into the workplace, and then from there you can have a job and clear that debt, and that was it. So that was a really big factor for me, and I wanted to, again, I was really social, so I wanted to be in a campus university. I felt that was like quite important to me, and so a lot of my decisions were financial, actually. And I picked one of the cheapest places in the country to go and study. And the downside to that was that when I left university, I hadn't picked a Russell Group university, which was then harder when you're trying to get into the graduate training schemes for the amazing organizations, the Big Four and some of those. And that was, then I started to have some regret. And I was thinking, oh, maybe I shouldn't have worried about this, that, and the other. Maybe I should have really focused on the academics, because I think by the time I got to the end of university, and as I said, I did my year in Paris, I was working like an employee at that point. Like I was getting up in the library 9 o'clock, working till 5, and had that kind of mentality. And so I was working really hard, and I got my first class honors degree, and that was really, I think that's really important for, again, when you're trying to then go and find a job. I think for me, I think it helps. I think having a good brand on your CV with a good grade at that time was helpful. And so the fact that I hadn't picked an elite brand was a regret at the time. However, I always had a part-time job, and I worked through the summers. And in those days, you got about, unmeans tested, you got about £3,000 a year to go to university. And I got another 1,000 for when I went to France. And so I had about £10,000, and I bought a house. Like within 6 months, I had a house. Yeah. And I still have that house. I own that house. It's in Oxford, and I have tenants in it, and some sort of pension there. So I don't regret the decisions I made, but I do remember after first leaving university and going for those job interviews, or trying to get those job interviews, I remember that being really hard. I remember that being a factor where it was just like, you just don't fit this criteria. And I was thinking, but I've got a good degree and I'm smart, and why can't I do that? So it was really, I found that really difficult when I was in my really early 20s and I was trying to get into the workplace. But then I fell into work, and then it kind of progressed from there. But one of the things around that whole Russell Group and the elite universities, I knew that when I was going to do my MBA, that I would then do it at a really good business school that mattered a lot to me because of that experience. And I mean, I had a great time doing my MBA, but it did matter that I was going to an elite school second time round. But I hadn't made that choice first time round.
What role did that initial regret play in the future decisions? I guess you mentioned it led you to wanting to do the MBA at an elite university.
Yeah, I don't know if I feel like I always wanted to do the MBA, and the next thing, and I'm not going to do it right now, but I'm going to do my PhD as well. I love learning, and what I do know is what happened with my first job is as I left university and I took this first job, I had this opportunity for a big promotion, and I was a baby really, and I was terrified, and I was completely, unqualified. And the person who was leaving, who I was going to take his job, he said to me, get a professional marketing qualification under your belt so that you know what you're talking about. So I go to the Chartered Institute of Marketing, and it's like, right, what do I need to do? And I sign up and I study. And those exams were like insane, considering that you're not qualifying as an accountant, but you would think that you were. It was tough going, those qualifications. And then as soon as I finished that, it was like, okay, right, what's next? Okay, now I'll do the MBA. And then I did the MBA. And then I think, fortunately, really, I then started having children, and I'm going to step out of academia for a little bit now. But I will definitely go on to do my PhD, and I think I will end my career in academia actually. But I think you learn along the way. So what have I really learned? And I love this when I talk to people who are making their decisions around university and all these things. Is at the time it seems so important, and it means so much, and you think, oh, I should have gone to this university or that university. I could have done things differently. But actually, what I found was once you're in a global role and you're working with some of the most amazing organizations in the world, everybody knows the one or two elite universities of, 6 or 7 countries. After that, nobody knows anything. So it actually doesn't matter at all. And what you find is, you talk to people around roles and things, and you're being hired, and there just becomes this tipping point where it's all about your experience and it has nothing to do with your education. I think what's always been advantageous is when you can see that someone has, just because you've been to university doesn't necessarily mean that you have anything to bring, that's for sure. But good grades are quite helpful in that you can see that somebody is either that they can really apply themselves to achieve a high grade, or maybe they're just actually really bright, and that could be really helpful as well. So I'm not saying that education is not important, because I do think it is, but I think the amount of times I put myself under all this pressure and actually in the long run, it didn't mean anything, So I think that is a factor. But at the time it feels like, yeah, life or death.
If you could tell yourself one thing for Suzanne who just finished university, what advice would you give yourself?
It's all going to be okay.
Yeah.
It's all going to be okay. And I think it doesn't matter what the situation. When I talk to people who are worrying about career choices, or whether they're going to have a family or not have a family, or settle down, or all these different things, take a step back. It's always been okay. And even when you've faced, some people face the most horrendous adversity in their lives, but it all works out okay in the long run. And that's what people have to remind themselves of.
It's the optimism. It's just it will work out. You said you studied marketing in university. How was studying marketing before going into your first role?
So at university, I did international business with languages. I did French and Spanish. My languages are so bad, but I love languages, even though I'm terrible at them. And so I studied a whole range of everything across international business. So marketing was just one element. So at that point, I didn't know where I was going. So I enjoyed everything. I enjoyed the Japanese car manufacturing and all the operations. I enjoyed all of the finance modules. I did, advanced financial accounting and all these things. I actually really love the variety around kind of running businesses and the whole piece around developing products that you take to market and you manage a business. So all of those factors, I enjoyed them all. And I actually just fell into marketing.
Oh,
So I took a job, a temp job. I had just finished my degree and my goal was to try and make as much money as possible. And my hope was that, wait for my grades. And then once I had my grade, I could then start to apply for the graduate training schemes and start like the following year. So I kind of thought I'm going to probably fill a kind of 12-month temp gap, just trying to earn as much money as possible. And I was working in an organization at this point, and they were building a community of doctors. So it was the largest network of doctors in the country at the time. And I was in the call center taking calls. And people would say things like, I forgot my password. Can you help me? And anything. And I like helping people. In fact, like more than anything else, I like helping people. And so I was doing this. And at the end of the first week, I was brought into an office and they said, how are you doing? And I'm fine. I've done a lot of temp work. Fine. Why are you asking? And so the help desk sat within marketing. They had this department called member services. So there was all the marketing activity and all of the support of the customers. And so he said, I'd like to make you an offer. So I don't know that I want to be in a call center like day in, day out for the next 12 months. And he gave me this piece of paper and he said, just think about it and, we can talk about it next week. And he wanted me to take this sort of kind of almost like an assistant manager job in this team. It was only a small team, but he had this idea. It was paying like well, considering, but I suppose that was the .com boom at the time. And just like snatching his hand off. Yeah, I'll take the job, So I went back with one day. So I was, and so then I was learning about marketing. His background, my line manager, his background was marketing, and so just even like putting copy together and creating ads and all of those kind of things, as well as like offering all of this support. But back to that whole market research, like when all of these doctors are saying things like, I can't remember my password, it's like, why don't we develop something so they can reset their own passwords and, some of these kind of things. So I really enjoyed that. And then actually my line manager, he left quite quickly. He'd got another job somewhere else. And the CEO of the organization, who's a really great friend now, he said, would I take his job? And so I would be running marketing. And so I just didn't think I could. And he was very encouraging, and they I had this big promotion, and they paid for me to go through the Chartered Institute of Marketing. So I went through that experience, and so that was my first real experience of holding a senior leadership role. I mean, I was so lucky. I was really a baby, but they were very kind to me. And that founder, he gave me a lot of opportunities and has done throughout my career, actually. So I took that role, and I learned about marketing, and I learned how to understand the needs. So I used to do a lot of events then. I was always going to, the Royal College of this, that, and the other, and deciding, oh yeah, that one's fun. I like the anaesthetists. I hang out with them. Yeah, not for sure, So I was always, often going around to these trade shows and stuff, and doing loads of events. And so telling people about what we're doing, trying to gather feedback, and trying to like sign up more and more doctors and more medical students, and get more use of all of the products that we had. We had an online forum, which was really early in those days. It was amazing to see how clinicians were supporting each other in the early days of online support and online education and learning and offering CPD and all these things. So it was really amazing to learn how to help with the development of an IT platform and help in health, which is like my real passion is people's health, and also how you scale a startup, and how you be part of a culture, how you form that. How do you then take it to exit? What does it all look like? All of those things. So I felt like I was moving at, a million miles an hour. It was just the steepest learning curve. And they never treated me like I was a 23 or 2-year-old. I felt really treated with respect. And I think I always knew that I had so much to learn, and it made me more sponge-like. I wanted to learn from everyone else. everyone was older than me. Everyone had more experience. They were really smart and wonderful people. And I just wanted to gather it all up, like teach me everything. And and it was just the most amazing place to start my career. I've had like really wonderful jobs and I've been very, very lucky. But I think back to that point around CV and things, I knew that I wouldn't have, back to that, the kind of elite university thing, I wouldn't have picked that brand because, it hadn't yet become a big brand, or, it wasn't offering classic things that would, we didn't have like an amazing pension scheme, or in fact, I don't know if we even had a pension scheme in those days. It was quite basic in comparison. So I probably wouldn't have naturally gone looking for it. And yet it was a perfect fit for me. And I mean, I love startups and I love SMEs. And so it was really amazing working with all of these doctors, really, and producing all this content and trying to engage and trying to be different. It was very dynamic. It was, sometimes I talk to colleagues about things like, medical reps, like waiting around all day long in the hope that they can see a doctor. And I'm saying 20 years ago, we were trying to eliminate this. Like, how is this still, how are things still going the way, they are in some cases. So it was very dynamic and it was very, very different and it was very exciting. But we worked hard and we were just trying to scale and scale and scale. And then I had an opportunity to go and do something very, very similar with IT professionals. And I thought, yeah, I think this is a good move for me. And the other thing was I was desperate to move to London. I was so lured by the big shiny city. And so I had moved. I was living in Oxford. I bought my house in Oxford, and I had a really amazing time with that organization. But yeah, I got to about 3 years, and I was like, okay, next thing, like let's go. And so I was building a community of IT professionals people who were using Oracle software and hardware. And again, it was a really good experience, learning so much. And there I wasn't just looking after marketing. I also was looking after sales then. So it was broader. I had a few more things within kind of my remit. I got really into PR then, for example, and yet PR had sat outside of marketing in the previous organization. So, but also still, I mean, that organization was, I think, 25 years old when I joined it. And yet we were probably 20, 25, 30 people. It was a nice size, really nice. And obviously in those days we were always in an office, no hybrid working or remote working. We were physically in the office.
How did you make that move from being in an environment where you were supported, the people believed in you, to deciding, okay, um, it's time to try something new?
If I'm honest, I knew I was ready for a bigger challenge.
Mm,
And I think that's the thing I think a lot as a line manager is I really love it when people come to me and say, I think I'm ready to move on. Well done. Like
yeah.
that, it's a good thing when you have really achieved everything that you think you can achieve in an organization. And sometimes if you're in like I say, this kind of learning culture where you can keep developing things and doing new products, then maybe it can kind of keep you going. But maybe you just need to move on and find something else to do. And I'm one for variety is the spice of life. I love
Mm,
my fingers in tons of different pies. And so if you are doing the same thing, and we were climbing a big mountain, I mean, it got there, but it was, yeah, I wasn't afraid of hard work and challenge, but I was perhaps, thinking about what else could I do? Because it's like I've added more doctors, more doctors, more doctors. There's great engagement,
mhm.
great communities getting bigger and bigger. And that's kind of what we're doing. And now I'm thinking, well, maybe I'd like to try something different. And I was keen to go and live in London. It felt like everyone had gone to London and it was really exciting and I want to do this. I was yeah, pretty keen. And actually I mean, for one of the few times in my life, really, was I applying for jobs. Then I was
Mm,
like, I think as you progress in your career, well, maybe it's a bit different now, but now nearly everything, it's someone approaches you or you know someone who knows someone, etc. And that's certainly some advice I'd give to people. But in those days, yeah, I was looking for jobs, and then some I don't know recruiter or something, or one I applied for, and the next thing I was talking to them and went from there and took the job. And then I had a lot of opportunity to grow. I've been really, really fortunate in my career that people have given me opportunities. And I think often given me things to do that I perhaps wasn't yet ready for, or certainly what didn't feel qualified for. Maybe I'm just using my own self-doubt. But I I felt like people gave me opportunities and I took them. I'd often be hesitant. I think sadly it's a bit of a woman thing, but I think, often thinking, I can't do that. I wouldn't be able to do that job. But once you've been given a bit of encouragement, then the next thing you think, okay. And I think certainly when I grew up, failure wasn't good. It was never good to fail. Like every competition, every exam, every everything, it's like you need to do your best. And your best is only good enough if you've done well.
yeah.
And so it didn't necessarily need to be the highest grade, but you needed to do well. And so when you go into a role, failure of any, failure where someone then says, this isn't the right role for you, was never, ever an option. As for now, I'm not going to say I take pride in it, but sometimes when you get to have a conversation with someone who's in the wrong job, like it's amazing to be able to actually say, okay, well, this role isn't working out. What do you really want to do? Because you
Mm,
clearly don't love this, else you'd probably be excelling at it. Like, how do I help you find your next role? And sometimes people are like, oh, relief. Like, oh, I can't, why was I doing this role? Like, I just did it because everyone else was doing it, or I thought I'd love it and I don't, and then it's like, okay, well, let me help you with you find the next thing. That is not the culture I was like brought into the workplace and school with. Like, do your best and your best needs to be good, and then never fail and do well at roles and make sure people like you and be accepted and impress people. Like, go. And, I mean, it's kind of lunacy now, but that was totally normal. And it's really hard to break away from that because probably it's only in the last few years that I've really realized that that is not an appropriate way to make people feel about life.
um,
Like life's an experiment. You need to try things, figure stuff out. I was talking to a really interesting entrepreneur earlier on today who's leaving their role and telling me about the journey that they're going on and, all these portfolio careers and trying different things. And I meet entrepreneurs all the time trying stuff and like there is no what right or wrong way. But I probably didn't know. I don't think entrepreneurial or entrepreneurship existed when I was at school. That's for sure. And a lot changed before it became a thing, and then it became everyone's thing. So yeah, it's a bit of a change.
it sounds like every job you had, they were seeing the potential in you. What do you feel like you were doing in order to help them see your potential? I probably not intentionally, but by being who you are.
Well, I'm curious and I wanted to learn. So I think that's a good sign, um, rather than coming with all the answers. I was vulnerable because for so much of my career, I was the youngest, right? So
Mm,
I had that feeling of I need to learn from you all. And I was probably pretty good then at like showing people some respect and also some admiration, right? And so I was really I loved learning from people and I think and I worked really hard. I still work really hard, but I think I was brought up to have a ridiculous work ethic. And so if things needed to happen, I was there. And if that was all night, I was going to be there all night. But, because I think I mostly worked in roles and industries where that kind of crazy working wasn't expected. And so the fact that I was willing to put more in. But I think also I did like challenging the status quo, not in an aggressive way. I wasn't like, why do we do it that way? It was just could it be done better? Could we change something that would? And I had a lot of ideas, but I also had caution. I think, the cool entrepreneurs around me, they have less caution. So they have the ideas and then they're like, just throw caution to the wind. They go for it. As for I'm like, hang on, let me just listen to my reserved voice for a minute and just think, should we really be doing this? So I was really happy to learn, to admire, to question appropriately, and then to really come up with the ideas so that we could do things differently, to do more. And I'm a high energy person. I really enjoyed being like, come on, we can do this, and really like I'm the person who's going to get people out of their chairs and be like, no, we are going to do this. And when people are like, this won't work, and I'm like, no, it will, come on, let's keep going. And yet at the same time, there are plenty of times where you're like, this is a bad idea. What have we learned from it? Let's use those learnings. Let's move on to the next thing. Not like I'm like the eternal optimist where the cup is always brimming over the top. I've got some reality with me. But I think that's kind of helpful when you're leading people, because people don't always then see that you're unrealistic as well as optimistic. So that kind of worked. That's kind of worked for me with my career.
I love it. A realistic optimist, the combination of both. So you mentioned then you joined the IT industry, basically doing the similar work as you were doing within the healthcare space.
So when I was there, I was finishing my CIM qualification, and then I went straight onto the MBA, and that was intense, the distance learning, over 3 or so years doing that. So it really kept me busy. And I mean, I stayed with them for nearly 5 years, which I think in this day and age is quite a long time. And again, I just felt like I had more opportunity and more opportunity. And then eventually I had this new role that was carved out for me where I was really closely supporting the chief exec. It was almost like a co-role. And that was my first opportunity to really like take a kind of a chief exec role. We were doing a lot of stuff together, and I think my job title was like, I don't know, strategy something or other, but it was really I really felt that I was given the opportunity by the board to do things differently. But again, in hindsight, and I wouldn't change anything, but I was really led, like happily led. But all those opportunities, it was like, okay, yeah. And I remember learning from one of the board members, he really taught me around like real project management, like Gantt charts and races and all these things. And before that, I just didn't have any understanding of that kind of stuff. And so I was learning a lot. And I remember some of the things he'd teach me, and just a really, really interesting person who was incredibly supportive in my career. And he was the chairman of the board. And actually, it's hard to single him out because the rest of the board were also incredibly supportive to me, and people that, again, if I called any one of them now and asked for something, they would be there for me, and vice versa. So I learned so many different things, and there were times where I was like, why are you teaching me this? And then like years later, you're like, and how did I think I could survive in bigger businesses if I didn't understand how these things work? So I learned a lot. And actually, where we'd done a lot of events when I was working with the doctors in my first role, in this next role, the biggest product we had with the community was events. We were running, the big event was like thousands of people happening in Birmingham once a year, hundreds of exhibitors. It was that kind of thing. But we had all of these, like, we called them special interest groups. So where you might have like 20, 30, 40, 100 people in a room. We were running them all the time, like day in, day out. And we had an amazing big events team. So I had all this experience of doing loads of things in events, like from being kind of the person on a stand that you're trying to like sell something to being the event organizer. Events was it's always been a big part of my career, accidentally, but I always say to people, if you cut me in half, I think it will say events. So yeah, I just fell into it, but I love it. So even though it hasn't been, I've never been an event organizer or anything, it's been a part of the roles that or the companies that I've worked with. So I did a lot with that and that organization. So learning like the ins and outs of events, like all of those things. That events team, they taught me so much. It was just brilliant. And now I would never organize even a party for more than 50 people without an op schedule. These people were brilliant. And again, it was a great team. I love the people I work with and I learned so much from them. And so again, then kind of there came a time where I think the MBA kept me there, and I think the board of directors kept me there, and the people kept me there, and the clients. I had so many amazing clients and clients that I'm still in contact with. And so it's quite hard to leave a community when you're building a community. In some ways, it's quite hard to leave it. But I definitely was ready for the next step up. I really need the next step up. And because I'd been doing my MBA, it was like, and I had worked now in two SMEs, one startup, one more established. And it was like, I want to do something bigger. I want to do something bigger. And so then I became a management consultant and I went to do that for the next couple of years.
How did you decide on management consulting afterwards?
I think back to when I was looking for jobs at the very start of my career, there was definitely an element where I felt that was kind of a good fit for me. I had a vision of what I thought management consultancy would be, and I thought that it would suit me. And I had, a desire to work for a bigger brand and all of those kind of things. And so with the MBA alongside it, it was kind of, it felt like things were aligning and you can't really say no.
What type of management consultancy did you do? Was it specifically one sector focused or?
So we were going through a lot of transition, I'd say, in the world of management consultancy then, because it's when digital transformation became a thing and everyone was digital transformation. So I was an experienced hire into digital transformation. So it helped that I had knowledge of like some of these implementations of IT projects and things like that. So I worked in marketing, sales, and service. And in my careers, I had done those jobs. I'd run the customer service, I'd run marketing, and I'd run sales, and they were grouped together. So we would do things like take something right from start to finish around kind of like customer engagement, loyalty, the software you'd use, the marketing automation, the platform. And we would often do these digital transformation projects. And we did it for all clients. I did everything then. I've done oil and gas. I did a little bit in health, but I did a bit of everything. I worked on the loyalty scheme for a big retailer in this country. I mean, I've done a bit of everything. And there were things I loved about it and there were things I loathed about it. So I felt that you had to go into a niche in order to progress quite quickly. It was like, what are you going to be famous for kind of thing? Because they want you to be experts. And that's not a bad thing, because then when a client comes and says, can I have this from you or that from you? You don't want to go, oh, well, we could try Suzanne. She's never done one of those before. It's like, well, no, hang on, they're paying a lot of money for you. Like, do that. And so it was good to kind of become an expert. And I didn't want to. I enjoyed the variety. So I might work on a comms project and absolutely love it. And then I wanted to do something else, like a change management one. Is there a role in the change management? Well, no, you don't have enough experience to go back into change management. But again, I worked with amazing people. And again, like some of those people that I'm still in contact with, great people, great leaders, people I could learn from, all the experience in the world. You're not a management consultant. Like you need to go off to the university and learn the tricks of the trade. And the detail into how to make the perfect PowerPoint slides. I mean, it's so important. And the models and making sure everything was perfect. Even like the way I save documents now, where everything's dated with versions and initials, it was like, you have to do this in a certain way. And I'm not criticizing that. I actually loved it. I loved the structure and the process and all of that kind of thing. So I loved it. But what I found was, in a way, it is that you do it this way. So that was a little bit hard for me.
In that role, you saw a few different industries. And I do remember initially you said healthcare was your passion. How did that sit with you, kind of this exposure versus really wanting to be within healthcare?
So at the time, I was learning so much that it didn't matter. And I was still very open minded about where I was going to go with my career. But I remember when we were having certain projects and it would be, oh, I hope I can land that one because then I'll be back in health or, that kind of thing. And I know how hard it is when you're trying to staff those projects. So you've got to put the right people in. And often if you're already working on a client, you stay with that client. I didn't mind, but I did from the consultancy, I went back into healthcare.
Oh, no, wait. Okay, so that then you moved back into healthcare afterwards. In what role did you end up moving to?
Yeah. So I went to work for a publisher. And so publishers, I mean, historically, you're publishing often magazines, some content anyway. And of course, by then, content was moving online. So there were lots of online platforms I was helping with the development of, as well as events. They have loads of events in publishing as well. So I mean, by the time I left that organization, I had within my remit the marketing of about 100 events a year. Across different industries. So I went back into health. I had health and I had local government within my portfolio. I was part of an organization that had a number of organizations within it. So it was quite nice because within our own organization, we were like relatively small, a couple of hundred people. But then that was like one of 5 companies that were all within the umbrella organization. And that organization was a PE backed business. And so there were high growth targets, and it was fiercely competitive in terms of we would have ideas to launch new businesses within our remit. So launching a learning product for nurses, for example, or an insights product for chief execs of hospital trusts. And so we were trying to work on these business cases where we would basically be going to the center and saying, can we have like 500,000 of investment? And then it would be like, oh no, look, they won the money, or yeah, we won the money this time. So it was really competitive. And it was, I mean, I loved it. I loved the environment, but it was kind of cutthroat in a way, in that it was like, go, next thing. It was really dynamic and fast paced. And again, I had really great people around me. And so I was there and I was like developing skills, learning new things. There was lots of pitching for the business, winning the money, taking the product to market, understanding, getting your build partners, doing all your UX, getting it out there. Next one, okay, we've hit the targets, right? Let's expand the sales team. It was just like go, 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 and brilliant leaders there, and really had a good time. And I was there for about a little over 5 years, I think. But that's when I decided to start my family and have children. And so that changes things a little bit. Fortunately, that the CEO of the business that I was in, she's a real powerhouse and also had children and really understood. So I felt when I went back to work, I felt like I couldn't have been more supported. She was incredibly helpful. And when we were talking about, do I want to go back full time or part time or all those kind of things. And at that point, again, she was really transparent with me. And, there was a plan to sell the business. And so what did I want to do? And I felt that I had a lot of opportunity. And I think after I had my daughter, I still had tons of energy, and I was like really ready to like go back and bring it on. Like, what's the challenge? Here we go. So I became the chief marketing officer for the business that was, and the goal was to sell the business off. So I worked with the managing director. He and I got on really, really well, and we helped sell the business. So we were courting all of the various buyers. Were we going to go for a trade buyer, or were we going to sell to PE? What does it look like? What could we get for the valuation? The business was kind of the decision. I mean, these weren't my decisions, but at more senior level, like we were selling it off a little bit piecemeal. We sold the first brand, they retained one brand, and then we sold another brand off separately. But we sold most of the brands together, and that was a brilliant experience. Like learning all of that data in the data room. What do they need? What do we tell them? how do we get the best deal? What should it look like? But ultimately, it wasn't my decision. Then who do we sell to? And then the organization was purchased, and then I was it was great to be really wanted to stay. They want continuity when you first go through that acquisition. And I'd seen a lot of M&A work from when I was working back with Oracle, because they were acquiring and acquiring, acquiring. And so I would see that integration. How do you just sweep in another software, like next one in, next one in, next one in? It was like a machine. And so how do we do that? How do we accommodate all those people? How do you get systems, etc.? So that's what I was really focused on. Like, can I help the new owners make the whole thing work like really seamlessly, and transitioning us to everyone on, one big platform, one big system, all of those kind of things. And so I was doing that, but I had a plan. I had a plan. My plan was to have another baby. I knew what I wanted, and I was just hopeful that it would all pan out the way you think that it will. It didn't. I didn't. I did. I had a miscarriage between my babies, and that was really, really hard, because it doesn't. You have a plan, and I think, as I said, you have this expectation when you first start on the career ladder, where it's like, it's not wonky. It's like one ladder, and you just go rung, rung, rung. It's so, and rightly or wrongly, it was like, I know what I'm doing, and I know what I'm doing with my career, and I want to be at this point and this point and this point, and just climbing that. And so, and I think with that acquisition, I knew for me personally that I wouldn't want to be there in the long term. I didn't want to, as I said, some of the other brands that I was passionate about had also gone, and so I knew that I wanted something different for myself in the long term. So yeah, it was tough, because these things are unexpected, and you don't know how to deal with it. Actually, I think it's wonderful how the world is moving forward, and I get to work with a lot of femtech businesses now, which I absolutely adore. But I think, as we know, like lots and lots of topics are swept under the carpet, and we're all told, you don't tell people you're pregnant until you've had that 12-week scan, and then you can tell people. And so when you're going through this whole process, it was very, very difficult. So, but I was very, very fortunate. The next thing, I was pregnant again, and pregnant with my son. And it's awful, but I was kind of thinking it then, like, I hadn't lost too much time, but that was kind of the feeling. You didn't want to lose the time. So I then, I was working, I was pregnant, and felt like forever, because I was in the second pregnancy. And then the next thing was, it was like, boom, I'm having a baby. And I think I had put myself under a lot of pressure at that point. Like, there was a lot going on, having had that miscarriage. Like, I was such a career woman, and I didn't want anyone to feel sorry for me. I didn't want anyone to think that I couldn't deliver everything that, this is so wrong, but it was, it's about what you think is right. And so I worked so hard to just put a brave face on, act like everything was fine. I had everything down. It didn't matter that I was pregnant, but actually my waters broke when I was 33 weeks pregnant with my son in a yoga class. And I was pretty ill after that. And it's awful to think about it, and I wouldn't encourage this at all. And sometimes it's not even about how other people, it's not necessarily even about the culture. It's about the way you do things yourself. But for me, yeah, I can think of times where I was like going into the operating table, and the next thing they're like, well, we're going to ask you to count down now. And you're like, okay, well, can you take the phone now? Because it's on me, because I just needed to send these emails. Sometimes that's about what we do to ourselves. But I think that's hopefully has made me a better leader. And I've loved when people have come to me to tell me that they would like to start a family, and how will I support them as the chief exec of the business, or yeah, how difficult it is when you're trying for a baby and you're not falling pregnant, and all these different things. And now, allowing people to have a voice when it comes to things like menopause as well. And it's not just women's health. I think, men's health, of course, is incredibly important. But I think, just firing out babies, it's almost, like it's not a big deal. Well, it is a big deal, and it's, it takes a lot of effort. And I think the support of the people around you is incredibly important. So I had my son And I didn't go back to the publishing organization. And we'd relocated. We'd left London. I'd been 12 years in London, and we'd relocated out to the Cotswolds. So I was ready for a change, and I had been there, I think nearly 6 years, even with the maternity. It's like something close to that. And so then this is a really good story now, actually, because what happened was, you remember I told you right at the very start of my career, I worked for an entrepreneur, and we'd stayed in contact. And he said to me, we were just having a catch up. My son was really small, and I said, what's been going on? And so I said, loads, and then he starts to tell me this experience where he's taken over as the chief exec of another business. He's a serial entrepreneur himself. He's going to run somebody else's business. And he tells me all about it. And he says, so do you want to come with me? And I'm like, yeah, of course I do. Well, first of all, it was kind of a Harvard Business School spin-off. And it was led by, or the chairman of the board was, he is a very well-known Harvard professor, back to my elite universities. But I think because I'm an MBA, when someone then puts these kind of phenomenal names in front of you, it was just like, I'm coming. Of course I'm coming. This sounds amazing. And so I went to, I was like, what do you want me to do? And he's like, anything, what he knew my skill set, and I'm very versatile. So I really became the chief operating officer. I had sales and marketing within me, and I had operations, and then we had a scientific team. And so it was great. And we were working really closely together, and I was learning all about this business. And then actually he ended up leaving the business earlier than originally planned. And I took his job. And that was my first opportunity to be a chief exec. And it was funny because, all these statistics about women leaders and all of this kind of stuff. And I was like, this is my role. This is my chance. This is, and I was fighting for it. And, I was younger than everybody had been, and also I wasn't a medical doctor. I was the first non-medic to lead the business. And of course they were hesitant. I'd never done a pure chief exec role before. That wasn't the board, it wasn't a reflection on me. It was just a normal, educated board being sensible about who they could or couldn't entrust this business to. So I fought so hard for it. I felt like I was just fighting and fighting and fighting. And eventually they said, why didn't I do it on it? It was kind of like, well, we'll get, if we just leave you here for 6 to 8 weeks, in that time, we'll find an interim CEO. And then once we've got the interim, then we can find the full time. And I was like, whoa. And then actually it just kind of got better and better, because as soon as I was given the opportunity, things just were improving and improving. And then what happened was they decided against the interim, and they gave me the role on an interim basis. And I felt great. And I felt like this was my stepping stone. But it was really funny, they gave me the job, and then it was like, amazing, thanks. And I sort of came away going, how do I do this job? I don't know. Within 5 minutes, they said to me, I said to them, I would like an executive coach. I was like, I think this will be good for me. And incredibly supportive. I was actually really fortunate that they allowed me to go through an amazing management consultancies program of leadership. That was incredible. But also I'd had a recommendation where I could join a group of other chief execs. And it was almost like a group process, a coaching program. And so I had a coach, and I was part of a group. And it was brilliant because I could take one-on-one sessions to the coach, but I also you could bring things as a group. And it was good to share. And again, really great leaders. And again, really still a part of my network. Sadly, we lost the coach last year. He died really unexpectedly, which was just awful. So it's hard because I'm approached by people who want to offer coaching positions all the time. But psychologically, I'm not ready to move on. So, but it was great for me. It's really good to have the structure, the discipline. I think one of the biggest challenges when we think about the roles we go into is accountability. We talk about responsibility, and who's responsible for this, who's going to do this task, but actually who is accountable, who is going to make sure that task actually gets done. And that is a really big challenge that we face in business and probably our own lives as well. So when you make intentions or goals or set objectives, then it's okay, who's keeping us accountable here, and being disciplined around when it's going to happen and how we do things. So I like lots of structure and process and all of those kind of things. So going back to this role, I took the role, and I had my coach and my coaching group, and it was brilliant. And I had an amazing time there, and I learned everything. I mean, I was so back to how I was at the beginning of my career, where I was just like looking up to these heroes and saying, teach me everything. It was the same story. It was like, now I'm a chief exec. What do I do? How do I do it? How do I take all this responsibility? How do I lose people from teams? Like, it was just different from, when, I've had bigger marketing departments and the size of the organization were kind of 30 or so people, and I'd had bigger marketing departments, but it was that oversight of everything, and that constant reporting into the board and ensuring that there are no surprises, but you're giving the right amount of information, not too much information. So I was really, really learning all the time. And yeah, that was what I did at the next parts of my career.
Who were you learning from as a chief exec? Who are you looking up to and being the sponge of?
Predominantly the board of directors. They were like the most, in a way, it was like they were the most important people, but always your customers.
Yeah.
And actually, do you know what? The publishing firm that I was talking about earlier that I'd worked for, I remember meeting the chief exec of the whole firm at a dinner one time, and he had a really successful business that he had sold, had been very, very successful, and he was back running this business. And I said, how do you go from being this entrepreneur, you come up with this idea, you build this business, you have, all your freedom, and now you're an employee, and you're reporting into the board and all the rest of it. And he said, you never have the freedom that you think. He said, there's always someone who's really making the decision. And he said, it's your customer, it's your investor, it's your, there are so many people. And so it just doesn't really matter like where you are with your career. There are so many different stakeholders, and you need to be able to understand how to manage all of those people, build rapport with all of those people, and help people get what they need out of that group. So that was really important for me. Those board members, but also my customers and my own employees. I think when you run a small business, you really have a feeling of a duty of care that's, I think, very different from anything else. And I think with small businesses, every startup will tell you this. There are times where you think, how are we going to pay payroll this month? How are we going to get through? How's this going to work out? This big challenge, who's going to deal with this? There are lots of tough times, but I think that's what binds you. I think it's, it's the community of the team and how you support one another. And I think that's one of the reasons why I like working with startups and SMEs.
You mentioned like one theme for you was vulnerability and curiosity. And I'm really curious how you managed to keep that up the more senior you got.
I mean, definitely not very well, because I was always trying to give this illusion that I completely knew what I was doing and totally had my shit together. Like, always trying to make people think like that, when really on the inside I was going, I don't know what I'm doing here. So I haven't been good at showing vulnerability. I am really good at putting my hand up and admitting when I've made a mistake or when something's gone wrong. So although I have like a large part of my brain that can't admit, doesn't want to admit failure and sees it as a bad thing, there is a part that knows that failing is a good thing, and then learning from it and how that helps you have the best possible end product. But vulnerability, I've never been good at. I'm working on that now in this decade of my life. But when I was 7 years old, I was diagnosed with dyslexia, and it wasn't desperately severe in when you think about the scale, but I just found it harder to read words versus children that weren't dyslexic, and I couldn't read as fast, and I certainly, my spelling was poor. So my whole life I tried to cover that up. And when I went to become a management consultant, you imagine you're stood in front of the whiteboard with the whiteboard marker, and I'm thinking, has that got two F's or one in it? I've got no idea, just can't, remember those things. So I would just, my writing would be a bit untidy, and you think, oh, hopefully no one's noticed. And actually nobody ever commented or noticed or whatever. So I never, ever told anyone that I was dyslexic until probably 3, 4, 5 years ago. And so all this time I hid it. I never told anybody because I so cared what people thought. And I felt like it would make me weak. Like I couldn't be vulnerable because it wasn't a good thing. And then I think actually once I became a chief exec and I achieved as a chief exec, then all of a sudden I realized that actually I was more accomplished than I realized. And I didn't have to pretend to be perfect anymore. And that was like the first time where, just someone would say it and I'd say, oh, and me too, and then, other people say, I didn't know you were dyslexic. Yeah. And of course it wasn't, now if a child is struggling to spell, they're assessed. I mean, if they can get an assessment, because that's the hard bit, certainly in this country, but wasn't normal for children in the 80s to be diagnosed with dyslexia. But I think because I was a bright child and then I was kind of then struggling in terms of like some of that speed, it was kind of like, what's going on here? And so I was, diagnosed. I had a tutor who helped me, that my parents paid for, and that definitely helped. But it was, it's not natural for me to be vulnerable. My natural is, the way I was brought up. It's like you put your brave face on, doesn't matter how what's happening today, put your brave face on, never admit. And that is wrong. That's completely wrong. And I really hope that, your audience know that that is completely wrong. And I think, I think people like to work with me now because I'm honest. And I think people know that I'm genuine as well. And so, yeah, it's brilliant when people say I'm worried about this thing or that thing, or I don't think I can do that, or how would I do this? Great. Like, problem shared is the problem, solved. And so I really do think that vulnerability is really, really important. And we should be teaching children that. And it shouldn't be that people should have to put a brave face on and act like they're brilliant and perfect and everything's normal. Be perfect, but don't be arrogant, and all these things. It's like you're constantly walking this tightrope. And I hope that, for future generations, that's it's happening less and less, and that people can be honest and they can take support and help. Because I think, as I said to you, like health is, for me, it's at the core of everything. I think without our health, we have nothing. And I think that if we can't look after ourselves, we can't take care of anyone else. So be it as a parent or a sibling or, a friend, or as an employee or an employer, we're all trying to take care of one another. And so we need to take care of ourselves. And it's yet one of the biggest challenges, because it's really hard to always, live the healthy life that we'd all like to live. And so when you know something is bad for you, like, why can you not stop doing it? Or if you know that something's particularly good for you, take, I don't know, exercise or journaling or whatever it might be, breath work, it's good for you, like make the time to do it every day. But none of us are perfect, and it's impossible to live the perfect life. But I think for me, the more I talk about it, the more well behaved I am. And I shall be doing a yoga class this evening, and I did work out at lunchtime. So I think it's important. I think health is so important, and I think from my experience of working in health, sadly, there is so much variation in health outcomes. And I think we need to try to get to a place where everybody has the best possible health outcomes that are attainable for them. And that shouldn't matter how rich or poor you are, or where you live geographically, or the color of your skin. Everybody is entitled to the best possible health outcomes. And we shouldn't have to hide that either, be it physical or mental health.
At what point do you feel like this passion around health started to come about?
I think for a long time, when you talk to other people about their careers, I felt that I was living a purpose-driven career because I was thinking about people's health. I like being purpose driven. I know it's fashionable now, but again, when I was growing up, it really wasn't so much of a thing. It was more get a good job where you're respected and you earn an appropriate amount of money, not too much money, but enough money. And this is like what needs to happen. And so purpose driven wasn't a thing then. I know it's really big now in comparison. So each job I've moved to, it's been very health focused. And actually, after I was doing a presidency term in the organization where I was first chief exec, where we were looking at health outcomes. When I decided that I would like to think about where I'll go next at the end of my presidency term, and I know some people that you might like to meet. And I met these people and they were building a mental health foundation. And so they were like, we need a leader. Go on then. But it happens so fast. It happens so fast. And that was the only downside, was that they were like, well, we needed it yesterday. And I'm like, I'm still running this organization. Like, how do I very quickly try and help them find another leader? And actually it was very fortunate because one of the board members agreed to step in as an interim, which was like a huge pressure off, because it's hard when you've given so much of your life to something, you care about it so much. And I desperately I knew from my own career, I was ready to take this next role, but I didn't want to leave the old one behind. So fortunately, that worked out really well. And I advised these really, really interesting high net worth individuals on the creation of a mental health foundation, and worked with neuroscientists around the globe and celebrities. It was really interesting, very, very different to anything I'd ever done before. And I made lots of recommendations. And then from there, I guess I was ready probably a while ago, but I didn't know I was ready. And I kind of thought about the way I go into a business as a chief exec, analyze what's going on there, make decisions on how you do things differently, what you want to change, what you want to keep, put certain processes and structures in. And I thought, I think I could do this for more than just one business at a time. I think I could do this again and again. But I wasn't willing to do it on my own. I am a classic extrovert. I need people to get for my own energy. And so I reached out to a handful of people that I really admired and respected and said, I've got this idea. What do you think? Will you come on the journey with me? And so there were 5 of us to start. So other people that I knew were either contracting or working part time and would have some capacity if I started to win clients. And so last year I set up my business. So I have my own advisory business now. And actually, we're just onboarding another advisor at the moment, well, perhaps 2 actually. So we're growing, and we're a small team, but it's good, it's fun, it's different. And I think what I've learned actually, because when I first set it up and I started telling people about what I was doing, someone that I'd worked with many, many years ago, he said to me, would you do that for my business? Could you do this audit process for my business? Come into my business and help me see how I can scale and how I would do things differently. And he asked me to do it for his business. And so I said, okay. And then we've been working together ever since. I've been working with his team, and I love working with his team. So I'm going to carry on working like really closely with his team, but that just gives the other advisors the opportunity to do some of the other work. And so it's that constant juggling act of like, especially when you win the work, and then who's going to deliver it, and especially when you don't have capacity. And I hired a research associate, Izzy, who's amazing. And Izzy, she just finished her A levels and she was having a gap year. So Izzy joined me, and she's learning everything. She's amazing, and that's been great. She's gone traveling now, so I just can't wait for her to come back. And it's great because also she will help me once she's gone to uni in September, so she'll be able to do things part time as well. So it's just kind of plugging the gaps. I feel very fortunate. I love to give people chances. So I know lots of people. So as soon as people say to me, "Oh, I lost my job," or I'm in between roles or whatever, I'm like, "Okay, what can you do to help me?" And so it's nice to try. And so I've been very fortunate. Like, I had someone do some amazing sales coaching with me. He was in between jobs, not for long enough. For me, of course, he left his job and he was like snapped up like that. And I said to him, "Would you consider doing some consulting for my business? He's an amazing sales leader." And the next thing, it's like, he's got another job. It's brilliant. He very kindly gave me some of his time, which was wonderful. but yeah, so we're small, but I think what I've learned is, career nowadays is more than varied. And I think I knew when I thought about what my career would pan out to be, I thought that there would become a time where things would be different. And, I think I said it before, I think I'll end up in academia eventually. But will I be in this place where I'm running my small advisory business a couple of days a week, and I'm maybe lecturing a couple of days a week, and then I've got my non-executive director positions like once a month, that kind of thing. And I think that's I think that's kind of somehow where I've ended up in my career, where I kind of have this kind of portfolio career. Um, but I love it, and I love like every client that I work with. I love, and there's loads of advantages of doing lots of different things in parallel. I think, like as I said, back to that whole ladder and how like linear it is. Like this isn't the real world, and I think especially as more time goes on, like we realize that it doesn't have to be like that. I think who doesn't have a side hustle? Like if you're in your 20s, you have a side hustle, like of course you do. Like that's what everyone does. What do you do on Saturdays? I record podcasts. Like what do you do? Everybody has, everybody is doing it. And I think, I'm like, yeah, but my side hustle is my children who are supposed to be my main hustle. So it's quite difficult when you're trying to like juggle it all. And I think, often I have this conversation with people where, people say things like, oh, and she doesn't even work. And you're like, whoa, hang on. I think you'll find that the job that she doesn't get paid to do is a job, and it's being a mother and a homemaker. That's the hardest job. So, and sadly, I am the generation where we were led to believe we could have it all. You could have a career, you could have a family, you could make the home, and all of the rest of it. And that is a lie. You cannot have it all. And it's impossible to have it all. And so you're constantly juggling, like, oh, should I just can't. And, I'm doing that voluntary work. I do voluntary work. I read in my son's school and my daughter's school. I read there with the children, and, it's just a small time commitment. But I think I want it all. I was told I could have it all, and I want it all. I want the career, I want the home life, I want to be an amazing wife and mother and an amazing friend and daughter and sister, and all the things, all the roles. And it's really hard, and so you just juggle and juggle and juggle. And I think I've learned that is the one thing I've learned is that loads of people make it look really easy, but it's a lie. No one's making it look easy. And even the people where, every single thing is being done by other people, like you've got, several nannies and housekeepers and all this kind of stuff, like, no, then you have all the guilt. Like, you can't, so it's really, really very hard. And um I think it's worse for women. I think often our children come to us before men. I don't know if it's from, carrying them in the womb and breastfeeding them, or, whatever. I just think it's often I think it is, it's harder, but we're gonna keep trying. I'm very fortunate to have a really amazing career and a family that I chose to have. Not everybody has that fortune and have a life. I want to travel the world and take my dog on amazing walks and do all sorts of things. And it's a juggling act, but and so don't be fooled by people who make it look easy. No one's actually making it doing it easily. But that doesn't mean we can't, have a good time pretending to make it.
I got a few last questions. How do you take care of yourself, juggling all of this and kind of reconciling that we can't have it all and we do need to make hard decisions sometimes?
So exercise is probably my key thing. So I normally work out about 5 times a week, but just normally 30 minutes. Like I swim. I broke my foot jumping off a horse a few years ago. So I can't run anymore because I think running is like amazing. Like just get up, do your 5K, feel good. It like sets you up for the day. But I can't run because I have so much metal work in my foot now. So now I swim. So it's a bit more effort, but I'll just get in the pool, do my 1,200 meters, done, out, crack on with my day. And I still ride, and I see a personal trainer. I like weights club. There's a really cool gym locally where I do women's lift, which is fun. Um, and just getting into our own little gym space and getting on the cross trainer and stuff like that. So I try and do that and then take the dog out every day. I want to get out, take the dog, even if it's just 30 minutes. I just think without that, everything else kind of falls apart. And then there are loads of things that I'm really passionate about. I like things like journaling, breath work. There are so many things I think doing, just daily exercises. Like there are some, and reading, writing things down. But it's not easy. And many days I don't want to say fail, but I don't manage to do what I set out to do. And I think that's why community is so important, because it really helps. So that's the most important thing, is trying to take care of yourself. And I think, I can really tell when I haven't been like doing that. And I think that's a really important part of my day, ideally every day.
It's really important. As you said, health is what makes you kind of do everything. And without it, we don't have anything. So kind of coming full circle now, we started with what do you want to be when you grow up? And now I guess we're asking, what's your why? Because what you said, we're versatile. We have a portfolio career. And so what's your why?
It's all about the health of people. That's my why. And the thing I feel really passionate about is inequality in health. We all deserve the best possible health outcomes. And it doesn't matter who you are or where you've come from, everyone deserves that. And so we have to take care of ourselves. We have to take care of each other. And I think that we have to innovate in healthcare so that we can take care of one another. And I think that the delivery of healthcare, there is so much amazing stuff that happens in the delivery of healthcare, but we still have inequality in health and poor variations in outcomes. And so that's all I'm going to do. I'm going to keep working with people and telling people about that. And I just love working with health innovators. I get to work with them all the time, people who are doing really cool things, stuff with data, technology, platforms, AI, like all these things are happening in all kinds of fields. I love seeing what's happening in wearables. I love seeing what's happening in personalized nutrition, because I think that makes a really big difference. We cook nearly everything at home. We probably are like 95% home cooked food and 5% like processed foods. We are doing our bit, but I'm very fortunate that the children are really interested in it, and it makes a really big difference. So that's all part of like looking after ourselves, what we put into our body, how we treat our body, and then when we need care from experts, taking that care. You'd be shocked, like, to know, like, often how poorly people adhere to medication guidelines, for example, even, recovering from things, physiotherapy, all sorts of things, like, and sometimes it's just a lack of understanding. And that's why I work with Cognitant, the patient engagement specialists, because they're really making a really big difference to that. And it's something I feel really, really passionate about. And I think until we're all as healthy as we possibly can be, then going to keep banging that drum.
So excited for you. And I mean, I align personally so much with this mission. We need it. We need to take care of ourselves and others, so that we can do good in the world and continue to make it a better place. One last question. What do you believe is the most underrated skill towards building a meaningful and sustainable career?
Honesty.
Honesty.
I think all the things we've talked about, like sharing vulnerabilities and all those things, it's honesty. And I think that it goes a long way to say where you really are. I think it comes back to sharing, being able to tell people where you are, what's going on, what you're trying to achieve. And I think that is the most important thing.
So true. It makes us there for each other and knowing when to get help and give help, helping each other really know where we're at and being honest about that. Oh, thank you so much, Suzanne. It was amazing getting to hear your story and getting to know you, and so many lessons shared with us. So thank you so much. for being here with
Thanks
us.
for having me. I really enjoyed talking with you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode and think that a friend or a family member might benefit from Suzanne's experience, please share it with them. Our goal is to demystify how career decisions are made in the real world and empower others to pursue a path towards a sustainable and a meaningful life. Follow us at Major Confusions on LinkedIn